could have happened in 1911. It could have happened in 1908. It could have happened in 1906. It didn't have to happen in 1914. But when the moment comes in 1914, all the Europeans simply just jump off the cliff and go into the war. So we're going to look at why it happens and get some details on that. And then the remainder of the day is going to be your time to work on the projects that you owe me. For those that have handed in the Napoleon Art Project, I have marked all those and fired all those back to you. A couple people, though, I've sent the project back to you to add the footnotes in. Okay, this is and let's just talk about this for a quick second. Every assignment that you do for me has to have footnotes. Has to. It must have citations. There's none of these assignments. I mean, obviously the Google questions that you're doing and so on, unless I specify, then you don't need footnotes. But for all 5 of the summative projects, you have to use footnotes. You have to cite the material. I said it on the first assignment and I sent some back. I said it on the second assignment and I sent some back. I said it on the third assignment and I've sent a number of projects back to people saying, you got to cite this. If you don't cite it, I can't mark it. I'm not marking it, and we'll go from there. So I asked a while back how many of you were coming back to Preston, and only a few of you were coming back to Preston next year. The rest of you are going off, I assume, to college or university. Do not hand anything in at university without citations, or at college without citations. Best case scenario, if you do that, what's going to happen is you'll get a 0 on the assignment and a very, very angry professor. Worst case scenario, you'll get called up on plagiarism charges for that. And plagiarism in high school is not nearly as serious as plagiarism in university. Plagiarism in university can carry with it anywhere from losing the credit, just like that, the $700 you spent on the course and the $170 you spent on the textbook and so on and so forth, they don't care. 0 on the course, you're done. All the way up to you actually being ejected from the university on plagiarism charges. And if that happens, then what they'll do is they'll inform the OUAC Center, the Ontario University's Application Center, which is in Guelph, where all of your college and university applications go. They'll alert them and say you were kicked out of McMaster or Queen's or whatever for plagiarism. And whatever school you apply to will have a big red flag on it saying, yeah, this person was kicked out of Queen's for plagiarizing. You can accept her if you want, but so really, really, really important that you cite your material and make sure you're doing it properly, okay? So this afternoon, I'm going to give you time to work on your projects that you owe me. Again, everything is now due by Friday. All right, so you've got 5 days left, less than 5 days. In 5 days, all the material has to be handed in to me. All the projects, I am putting your marks into your final grades into the system first thing on Monday morning. So you don't have an extra week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get this stuff done. I'm not chasing you down anymore. You've got till Friday to get it done, folks. So if that's going to be a problem for you, if you're going to have an issue getting that stuff done, then you need to get on your horse today and start saying, here's my issue, here's what I'm going to need to do. You need to initiate a conversation with me and say, here's what I'm looking at. But right now, of the 25 people in the course, I'm still missing a number of assignments, the earlier assignments from people. Don't forget, this isn't like last year. It's not like last spring where the government said, everybody passes. You can and you will fail this course if you don't get your work in. All right, so get her done, get it in. If there's an issue, talk to me sooner rather than later. Okay, let's start looking at the causes of World War I. And we're going to do this in I haven't got a PowerPoint for this today. We'll use the map on the back there, and I'll add a few add some information in and so on. Things that we need to understand in terms of what's happening in Europe in 1914. Just like with the French Revolution, there are short-term causes and long-term causes, and then there are immediate causes. Just like with the Russian Revolution, which we'll talk about tomorrow. There are short-term, long-term, immediate causes. The First World War is a war that is 100 years in the making. The last time the Europeans had gone toe-to-toe with one another had been in 1815, the last of the Napoleonic Wars. Since 1815, with the creation of the Congress of Vienna, or the great power system, as we already talked about, there has not been a major European war for 100 years. There was a bit of a blip in the 1850s in the Crimean War. Crimean War is a small war that happens between Britain and France on one side and Russia on the other in the Crimea. The Crimea is right here in the Black Sea, here, right down here at the bottom of Russia. This is where the Olympics were held in Sochi. That's the Crimean Peninsula. It's a brief war. It doesn't really change the outcome of anything in Europe. It doesn't really have any sort of major ramifications in Europe politically, socially, and so on. Doesn't impact the balance of power. What it does do, and we talked before about the fact that the Ottoman Empire is slowly dying as an empire. This is one of the things that when we talked about unification of Germany, the Germans, Otto von Bismarck, uses this to get the Russians on his side in 1867 when they attack the Austrians. As the Ottoman Empire is collapsing in the 1800s, this whole area down here, which is going to become integral to our story today, the Balkans, the Russians are interested in that area. Well, prior to the war against the Austrians, what the Russians were trying to do was increase their influence down here in the Black Sea. And what they wanted to do was come across the Black Sea into present-day Turkey, and they wanted to gain control, absolute control, over this waterway right here between the Black Sea and the Aegean Sea, which is called the Dardanelles. They wanted control over that to make the Black Sea their own sea, and then that would give them access to the Caspian Sea, etc. Britain and France didn't want to allow that to happen, because if the Russians could control the Dardanelles, then Russia would have a free hand to start exerting its influence in the entire Mediterranean. Not what the Europeans wanted, and that's why there's a war in the Crimean Peninsula. But overall, the Europeans have not fought each other for 100 years. Two things come out of the Crimean War that still last to this day. One, during the three things, I guess. During the Crimean War, there is, because there are so many guys that are injured and negatively impacted by frostbite and so on and so forth, there is a new system of triaging individuals that are injured to try and determine whether or not they need immediate medical attention, otherwise they're going to die, whether or not they can be stabilized and worked on later on, or whether or not they can simply be treated and then released. And the nurse who is most responsible for this work, because she goes there, volunteers with the British Army, works with them. The nurse that is responsible for developing this triaging and innovating what nurses need to do was shocked by the fact that most of the other people that were with her volunteering during the Crimean War didn't really know what they were doing. So she went back and founded a school of nursing in England, and then set the standards for nursing schools across the world. And to this day, anybody know what that nurse's name was, who developed the very first nursing school?
Florence Nightingale. Sorry, I turned on my...
Florence Nightingale. There you go. So Florence Nightingale develops the Nightingale School of Nursing, where my mom went to be a nurse. And so that comes out of it. So there's a change in medical practice that happens as a result of the Crimean War. Secondly, you've got Alfred Lord Tennyson's poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade, which comes out of that, if anybody's into poetry. A very famous poem. There was a disastrous charge by this brigade, cavalry brigade in the war. They all got slaughtered. Alfred Lord Tennyson wrote a poem about that. And the third thing that comes out of the Crimean War is a major change in men's fashion. Beards had not been widely sported in Europe for a couple hundred years at this point, by the 1850s. Most men didn't have a lot of facial hair. Mustaches were very popular, but full beards, not popular at all. So I would have been walking down the street in 1850. People would have looked at me very strangely because nobody wore a full beard in the 1850s. However, beards become fashionable and popular, in particular in Great Britain and France, after the Crimean War. And the reason for that is that it was so cold in the winter of 1851 in the Crimea that the British officers, the British Army, relaxed its regulations on facial hair that the men were allowed to have. British soldiers were not allowed to grow beards. They were allowed to have, you know, lamb chop sideburns, or they were allowed to have a mustache or whatever, but they were not allowed to grow a full beard. But because so many guys were getting frostbite and it was so cold, the British Army allowed the men to grow beards to protect their faces from the Russian winter. And anyway, when the men came back after the war, a lot of them kept those beards on their faces and were immediately recognizable as war heroes. They had been in the Crimean War. They kept the beard. You saw a guy walking down the street with a beard. You go, "Were you in the Crimea? Congratulations. Thanks very much for going to fight for Great Britain." And they were so popular, in fact, that people that hadn't served in the war began to grow beards in order to be mistaken for war heroes, in order to, you know, go out and date the girls or whatever. So those are the only three things that come out of the Crimean War. But the Europeans have certainly been at war in the 19th century. Like you looked at last day, looking at imperialism in Africa and in Asia, they're not fighting each other, but they are going all over the world, and they are causing mayhem and chaos and so on. As we said, 20 million Chinese are killed by the British and by various other forces between 1820, when the Opium Wars begin, all the way up until the final act of Chinese rebellion, which is the Boxer Rebellion between 1898 and 1901, which finally results in a massive European invasion of China. There is a coalition, a unified group of powers that all attacked China in 1898 because of the Boxer Rebellion, because this group, which is called the Boxers as a short form, but their actual name is the Harmonious Society of Righteous Fists, which is a great name. They end up trying to establish or trying to reassert Chinese sovereignty again. They attack the group they find or they feel is most representative of European attitudes and interests, which is a group of priests and nuns from the Catholic Church are killed by this group, the Boxer rebels. And as a result of that, there is a massive coalition of Russian, British, Dutch, Belgian, German, Italian, French, Spanish, and American troops that all attacked China in 1899 through 1901. It results in what's called the Open Door Treaty, presided over by Teddy Roosevelt, and that leads to China's 5 big cities, Nanking, Shanghai, Beijing, Taiping, and Hong Kong, all being opened up to British trade, becoming free cities, and that starts China on its path towards its own sort of internal civil war in the 1930s between Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong, which results in China becoming communist, 1949, and so on. All right. So they've been doing a lot of damage around the world. They've taken over all of Africa between 1870 and 1890. 9/10 of Africa is colonized in a very, very, very haphazard, random way. The Europeans are like the birds in Finding Nemo, like mine, mine. They're getting as much of Africa as they can as quickly as possible, which results in devastation in Africa. That lasts to this day. The reason why I've had students in the past say, why is Africa as a continent so messed up politically and economically and socially and so on, and it all results back to this European imperialism because it happens so rapidly and so haphazardly the boundaries that are drawn, groups of people are thrown together that don't get along with one another. Just like after World War I, the Europeans will jam together in the Czechs and the Slovaks, who are two groups that are very, very distinct from one another, into one country and call it Czechoslovakia. And then they'll take groups of people that differ, culturally and linguistically and religiously, the Bosnians, the Serbians, the Montenegrins, and the what are the other ones? And they bring them all together and call them all Yugoslavians, right? Well, you can't just jam a bunch of people together into a country and force them to get along. What happens is, of course, eventually you're going to have the Czechoslovakia or the Yugoslavian civil war, which results in tens of thousands of rapes and mass murders in Srebrenica and so on in the 1990s. Well, and the same thing happens in Africa, right? Where you get the Belgians that jam together the Hutus and the Tutsis and the Twa all into one country and call it Rwanda. You can't just jam all these people together into a country. You're going to have problems afterwards. So anyway, the Europeans have been practicing and honing their imperialism and their militarism and their nationalism in Africa and in Asia. Ultimately, that's going to come back and spiral back onto them when World War I breaks out. And it's important to note as well, when we look at these ideas of imperialism and nationalism and militarism, that it's like a snake feeding on its own tail. As the Europeans, let's start with imperialism. As the Europeans expand their influence into another country. So let's say, I'll write the words here on the boards, okay? We don't need France anymore. We'll get rid of France. There we go. As the Europeans expand their influence, so with our first ism, imperialism, as they expand into, let's say, Southern Africa, so where present day you've got South Africa, you've got Zimbabwe, and so on. As the British go into there, imperialism increases. The British get gold and they get silver and they get all kinds of raw materials and so on from the countries that they go into. So imperialism is a great thing for the British. Well, what does that do? The more territory that Great Britain takes over, the prouder people are to be British, the happier they are about being British. So imperialism feeds nationalism, right? It creates more nationalism as the people are more and more excited about being British, and the sun never sets in the British Empire and so on and so forth. Everybody's happy that Britain's taking over more land, except for the people in the land that are being conquered. So because you've got the Zulus that are very unhappy about being conquered, or you've got the Boers that are very unhappy about being conquered by the British can't just take over the territory and then bring their forces back. What they have to do is they have to leave their forces there in those areas, have to garrison those troops, which means you need to have a growing military, which increases the level of militarism, right? Then the bigger your military is, though, well, the prouder people are about having a really large military and the big boats that go everywhere, so nationalism is fed. And the more military you've got, you can't just have these guys sitting around doing nothing. So what do if you've got a bigger military and you've got rising nationalism? Well, then we might as well go and get more territories. And so the whole idea of imperialism feeding nationalism, feeding militarism, and so on and so forth, this just becomes a snake eating its own tail, and it becomes a cyclonic, devastating idea. These three isms are really one large concept that we have to understand as driving all the Europeans in the late 19th century. Every single European power is growing in military size, with the exception of the Italians. For whatever reason, between 1870 and 1914, the Italian army shrinks by 37,000 troops. Everybody else's army increases massively between 1870 and 1914. Everybody is developing large empires. Everyone is growing, having this increasing sense of it's great to be Italian, it's great to be German, it's great to be French, whatever it happens to be. And all these ideas then, coupled with social Darwinism, the concept that the Europeans feel that they are superior, really leads to a huge flaw in their mentality, which is, after 100 years of not fighting a major European war against another industrialized, mechanized nation, all the Europeans have forgotten what war is really like. when two equals go toe-to-toe. China is not equal to the Europeans in the late 19th century because they haven't got the industrial technology, they haven't got the gunpowder and the dynamite and the high-velocity rifles that the Europeans have got. The Chinese are in no position to go toe-to-toe with the Europeans. None of the African nations are in a position to go toe-to-toe with the Europeans, but a European nation is certainly capable of holding its own against another European nation, which should have given them cause or pause for thought, but it doesn't. It's been so long since the Europeans have fought one another. It's been so long since they've had a really devastating war. The last one, again, ended in 1815, that the Europeans really are not afraid of a war in 1914, which is part of the reason why they all jump off the cliff together, okay? So we've got these three isms as one of the primary causes of World War I. Something else we have to understand, though, is that, and we can take a lesson from the past to the present day, there is a big change politically happening in Europe as well at this point in time, which is the extension or the creation of universal male suffrage all across Europe, with the exception of Russia. Okay. By 1905, Russia allows for universal male suffrage, but the rest of Europe has allowed for universal male suffrage by around 1885. With the increasing extension of the right to every single male in the country, in England or in France or in Germany or in Italy or whatever, what that leads to, with all the other isms that you're looking at right now, liberalism and conservatism and socialism and trade unionism and so on, it leads to a plethora of new political parties being born in the late 19th century. And we might look at that as a positive because now people are able to vote, now people are able to express themselves at the ballot box. The problem with this, though, is that with increasing universal male suffrage, with the creation of new political parties that are very specified in terms of what their ideas are, left-wing parties and right-wing parties, it is far more difficult in Europe in the early 20th century to have any sort of major political consensus. Every single power in Europe is rocked in between 1912 and 1914 by some sort of political and or economic crisis between 1912 and 1914. In Great Britain, there's a massive trade union strike. In Italy, you've got communist rebellions that are happening. In France, you've got strikes that are paralyzing the railway industry. In Germany, you've got the rise of very, very strong left-wing and very, very strong right-wing parties that are petitioning the government for massive change. The difficulty is, with all these new crises that are happening, two things occur. One, with polarization, with extreme left and extreme right-wing polarization in the political climates in Europe, the all-important centrist voice, the all-important voice for compromise, to find some sort of common ground, is obliterated. In every major European country, there is no strong centrist political parties. Everybody is polarized to the far left or to the far right, which means that with no real ability to find compromise, common ground, etc., couple those ideas, by the way, those political ideas, with these three isms that are on there. So some parties are very much in favor of increasing the British Empire or the French Empire. Some parties are increasingly against doing that. Some parties are very pro-military. Some parties are anti-military. Look at all the areas of contention between the Democrats and the Republicans in the United States today, right? There is no common ground in the United States. There is absolutely no ability to find centrist agreement on anything. And even things that are really, really pressing concerns, climate change, gun control, etc. in the United States, they can't agree on the color of grass in the United States right now. The entire centrist compromising voice has been obliterated, and now you're either a Republican and you're pro this and anti that, or you're a Democrat and you're pro this and anti that, and there is no common ground. And what's happening is the United States government is paralyzed. And what they're not realizing, while they've still got their heads in their own nationalist sand, saying that America is the greatest country in the world, isn't it great to be American? They are losing their influence around the world. They're losing their economic advantage. They're losing the only thing the Americans have got now that is greater than any other power on the planet is the size of their military. That's the only thing the Americans have going for them. Their economy is shrinking. Their life expectancy is going down. It's one of the only industrialized nations where this generation, the younger generation, is actually their expectation for life is shorter than their parents. The Americans are on the way out. And they're not realizing the dangers that they see around them because they can't find that common ground. They can't work together to improve their lot in life. The same exact thing is happening in 1914, but it's happening in Germany, and it's happening in Italy, and it's happening in France, and so on and so forth. The other big issue that we can take from this is that because there are crises at home, because there are conflicts, because there are economic problems that the British government can't solve, that the French government can't solve, that the German government can't solve. Well, how do you avoid having the people rise up against you? How do you avoid having the people get angry at you as the government? You have to give them somebody else that they can get angry at. And so in 1914, when all the fates conspired to bring the world to the brink of war in 1914, a war is viewed as a positive in Germany, in Russia, in Austria, in France, in England, because what it will do is it will bring the people together in a common ground, which is we are at war with somebody else. In times of war, everybody drapes themselves in the flag, everybody wraps themselves, in the luster of the British Empire or the French Empire or whatever, and off they march. It doesn't matter if you're left wing or you're right wing. It doesn't matter if you're pro this or anti that. You're all French or you're all British. We're all going to war, and everybody starts singing "Rule Britannia." And that's why, again, in 1914, there's a war when there wasn't one in 1906 and there wasn't one in 1911, because the economic and political crises that are paralyzing all the major European powers, the only way out for them to get out of the mire that they are in, the muck that they are in, is to wage war against somebody else and distract their population for a while. And everybody thinks it'll be a short, quick, dirty little war and we can all come back home. And by that point in time, maybe this economic crisis will have passed. What nobody expects is the greatest war in European history until World War II. They don't expect it to last for 4 years. They don't expect it to kill 20 million people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? So, isms are causing all kinds of problems leading up to World War I. On top of that, the increasing political strife in Europe makes war look like a positive adventure. But on top of that, we have to look at what's going on in Europe as a result of the German and Italian unifications. Because, I said to you before, when Italy is unified in 1870, you've now got 6 great powers, not 5. Used to just be the 5 of them: Russia, Prussia, Austria, England, France. Again, you can compromise when you've got 5. You have to compromise when you've got 5 powers. When you've got 6 and there can be a tie at the Congress of Vienna, you don't have to compromise anymore. What you do need to do, though, is you have to have people on your side. So after 1870, and this all revolves around Otto von Bismarck. After 1870, Otto von Bismarck realizes that the Treaty of Versailles that he imposed on France, the 1871 Treaty of Versailles, was too harsh. It had alienated the French people. It had made the French very, very angry. And it very much made for the possibility of another European war much, much sooner, because the French were enraged at this treaty and they were looking for an opportunity to get back at the Germans. So what Otto von Bismarck does is between 1870 and 1892, Otto von Bismarck arranges a whole series of alliances against the French to alienate France from the rest of Europe militarily and politically, and to make sure that France can't go toe-to-toe with the Germans at any point in the near future. So there are a number of treaties that he creates. And again, in grade 10, we talked about the alliance system. And we talked about the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente. Those are the two that you did on your map, and you would have colored in a map like this one on the board. There we go. Get rid of all this. Between 1870 and 1892, Otto von Bismarck creates a series of alliances. There are three big ones that he creates. Okay, so number one, he creates something called the Three Emperors League. And again, the idea behind these alliances are to, like I said, alienate France. So there are three emperors that he wants to have united together. The Three Emperors Leagues, the three people that are involved in that are Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia. Each one of them has got an emperor. You've got the Tsar in Russia. You've got the Kaiser in Germany. You've got Emperor Franz Joseph in Austria. They're all emperors. They're all just king, Tsar, Kaiser, emperor. They're all synonyms for one another. So the Three Emperors League is created. This is a military alliance. It's an economic alliance. And this alliance goes from 1872. It's a 20-year alliance. Goes from 1872 to 1892. And that's how long, and then after the 20 years, they can renegotiate and do what they want to do. Most alliances are not permanent alliances, right? I mean, we've got a permanent alliance with the United States, and we have had for the better part of 150 years. Most countries don't have that. So number one, you got the Three Emperors League that's created. Second one that is created is the Triple Alliance. And the Triple Alliance is Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. So those three are now brought together. And the Triple Alliance is a 50-year deal. The Triple Alliance is purely military, and it is a defensive military alliance. It's an important point we're going to talk about later on. So this goes from 1872 until 1922. That's what it's supposed to last. Defensive military alliance. Finally, because of problems that are happening in Europe, and in particular in the Balkans, in this area down here, as the Ottoman Empire is collapsing, the Austrians and the Russians are getting closer and closer to going toe-to-toe with one another in the Balkan territories. So with pressure in 1887 from the Russians, Otto von Bismarck signs another deal with the Russians called the Reinsurance Treaty. And the Reinsurance Treaty, is just Germany and Russia, and it reinsures the fact that Germany will not go to war with Russia, Russia will not go to war with Germany in the event of any sort of problems in the Balkans. Okay, the idea behind this is that Austria and Russia are likely going to go to war. They don't, but they feel that they're likely to go to war. The Russians don't want the German industrial and military might on the side of the Austrians in the event of that war. So that's all that this is, okay? So you'll notice that there's two countries that are not involved at all on the board. You don't have the French there. Like I said, Otto von Bismarck is orchestrating alliances against France. And you don't have England. And the reason for that is that England doesn't need to be in an alliance or a treaty with anybody. England, at this point in time, by the 1880s, 1890s, is the unparalleled, untrammeled, unquestioned master of the oceans. It's got the biggest empire that the world has ever seen. It's got the biggest navy that anybody's ever seen. It is running its navy according to a thing called the two-power standard, which means take the navies of any other two countries in the world, Russia and Germany, or France and Germany, or France and Russia, or Russia and the United States, whatever, and England's navy is twice the size of all of that. So England is far too interested in devastating Asia and devastating Africa to get involved in European conflicts. England has also learned, after those three wars of German unification and Italian unification, that the Europeans aren't really interested in what England wants. So England's doing its own thing, and the Europeans are doing their own thing. So between 1872 and 1892, France is isolated. Things are working very well for Otto von Bismarck. This all changes in 1892. In 1892, Kaiser Wilhelm II, so his dad, Kaiser Wilhelm I, who was presiding over Germany when Germany was created under Otto von Bismarck in 1871, has become the new king. So Kaiser Wilhelm I dies. Kaiser Wilhelm II becomes the king of Germany. He will remain the king of Germany until World War I. He comes into power, and like a lot of younger guys, taking over their dad's business, taking over responsibility for the household or whatever, he wants to kind of do things his own way. He wants to get rid of all the things that his dad did. He needs to make himself stand out. He's got a lot of complexes. He's got a lot of issues. He overcompensates for the fact that when he was being born, the doctor used a pair of forceps to pull him out of his mother. The forceps severed nerves in his arm because the forceps went into the arm socket, left his left arm completely useless, dead. So any pictures you see of Kaiser Wilhelm, he always has his hand on his sword, and his sword is on his left side, not his right side. Most guys wear their sword on the right-hand side. But Kaiser Wilhelm wears his on his left, and the reason for that is that his left arm is actually with a wire tied to his sword. So as he walks around, his hand's always on his sword like this, so he can salute and do everything else. But his hand is tied there, and the reason it's tied is because otherwise it would just kind of dangle uselessly. In a militaristic nation, and a nation that prides itself on manliness and brawniness and vigor and so on and so forth, having this withered left arm really gives him a bit of a complex. A lot of, Freud would be sitting there saying, tell me about your father. Lots of issues for Kaiser Wilhelm. So when he becomes the king, the Kaiser, he wants to do things his own way. One of the things he wants to do is reassert his commitment to other Germanic peoples and distance himself from Slavic peoples. He's anti-Slav. He doesn't really like the Slavic people, so that would be anybody that's Eastern European. So the Poles, the Czechs, the Slovaks, the Bosnians, Serbians, Montenegrins, etc. It doesn't really want any alliances with any of those groups of people. So when we look at this, 1892, this treaty, the Three Emperors League Treaty, is about to lapse. Another treaty, the Reinsurance Treaty, is about to lapse. Otto von Bismarck goes to Kaiser Wilhelm II and says, listen, sire, I understand you want to do things your own way. I've been organizing this continent for the last 20 years. I put the country that you're in charge of together in the first place. I'm the reason you've got a country because of me. Listen to me when I'm telling you, you have to re-sign these treaties. You have to keep the Three Emperors League going. You've got to keep the Reinsurance Treaty going. Kaiser Wilhelm II says, I don't want to. I don't like the Russians. I don't want to be allied with the Russians. I want to increase my commitment to the Austrians. I want to increase my commitment to the German peoples, to the Danes, and so on. I don't want to be in an alliance with the Russians. This goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And what happens then, Otto von Bismarck, who's already an old man at this point, loses his temper. And in front of the entire court says, this is what he literally says, to Kaiser Wilhelm II, you are a stupid, vainglorious little boy. In other words, you don't know what you're talking about. You're a child. Listen to me. Otto von Bismarck went too far when he said that. Kaiser Wilhelm II, according to people that were there and saw it, visibly paled. He was so angry and shocked at what Otto von Bismarck said. Stood up, said to Otto von Bismarck, thank you for your service to Germany. You're fired. And fires the guy that created his country, fires the guy that orchestrated the last 20 years of European alliances and diplomacy and so on and so forth, sends Otto von Bismarck off the pasture, and he's gone. Well, what happens? Otto von Bismarck has tried for 20 years to keep France out of alliances. Well, now, in 1892, this treaty lapses. It's gone. And this treaty, the Reinsurance Treaty, is gone. It lapses. Well, what happens now then is you've got two countries that are left out of the loop. Two countries that have been snubbed by the Germans. The Russians on the one side and the French on the other. Well, what does France do? France reaches out to Russia and says, hey, why don't we have a bit of an entente together? Why don't we have a bit of a deal? And so, just like Otto von Bismarck warned, if you don't ally with the Russians, and if you don't keep your foot on the neck of the French, we're going to have a problem. In 1892, you have the Franco-Russian Entente. The Franco-Russian Entente is created. And the Franco-Russian Entente is a military alliance. It is a defensive joint military alliance, which is that if either of them gets attacked by Germany, the other country will come to their aid. And this now is a massive problem for the Germans, because what this effectively does, let's go to this map, is that this now hamstrings anything that the Germans want to do on the continent. Because if they run afoul of the Russians, who are on their eastern border, then what that means is if they go to attack the Russians, they're automatically at war on their western border against the French. If, on the flip side, something happens, the French get out of line and the Germans attack the French, or they find themselves in a war with the French, that automatically means the Russians are coming from the other side. Germany now has to face the very real prospect of a two-front war, which is not what anybody wants to fight, which is what leads to the creation in 1895 of the Schlieffen Plan, which we talked about in grade 10. So the Schlieffen Plan is Germany recognizing, realizing that in the event of a war against France or against Russia, they're going to have to fight them both. Well, who do you attack first? You've got to attack the French first. A, French are smaller. B, the French are more industrialized. The French are going to be ready to go quicker than the Russians. The French have got all kinds of railroads and roads and everything else. The Russians do not. The Russians are not industrialized. The Russians have got less than 5,000 miles of railroad track. In 1895, Germany, on the flip side, has got 45,000 kilometers of railroad track crisscrossing Germany left and right, east and west. Well, the idea then is, okay, according to Count von Schlieffen, what we'll do is we'll take all of our forces here, we'll go to attack the French, but rather than attacking the French at our common border, which is right here, we'll go around that common border by going through Belgium, attack the French from behind so that they don't see us coming. We'll beat the French in 6 weeks. Then what we'll do, because it's going to take the Russians at least 8 weeks to mobilize, we'll beat the French in 6 weeks. Then what we'll do is we'll take all of our forces, use our railroad tracks, ship everybody back this way, and hit the Russians on the other side. So knock one out, then go after the other. That's the idea behind the Schlieffen Plan and why they plan on doing that. Belgian neutrality is guaranteed by an international agreement, but Germany didn't sign that international agreement. Therefore, they are not bound to uphold it. That's the whole idea behind all this. This becomes an inevitability as of 1892. Well, how does this get England involved at all, right? Because England's been off doing their own thing, like I said to you before. The English are rightly and justifiably proud of their navy. However, Kaiser Wilhelm II, while also completely pissing off the Russians, decides that what he wants to do is rival the power of Great Britain by building his own navy. He wants to have an empire like the English have got, like the French have got, like the Russians have got. And what he believes is, I need to have a proper navy in order to do that. Now, shouldn't have pulled that map up yet. When we look at Germany, Germany's got a huge coastline. The German coastline goes in the 1890s. The German coast goes all the way from here, okay, where the Netherlands are, all the way from here where Bremen is, all the way across up here into the Baltic, all the way over into present-day Poland and Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, okay? Had they put their navy anywhere here in the Baltic, then England wouldn't have been necessarily threatened by that. Primarily because if they put their navy in the Baltic, then they're really more of a threat to the Russians than they are to the English. But Kaiser Wilhelm doesn't do that. Kaiser Wilhelm puts the German navy right here in the North Sea, not the Baltic, but the North Sea, which is justifiably seen by Great Britain as a threat to British control over the English Channel, British control over the North Sea, and the Navy clearly is a threat to them, not to the Russians. For the British then, this is going to be a problem. So the British decide to unveil their latest new secret weapon, which is a new warship they've been working on, they've been developing, called the Dreadnought. And the Dreadnought is the biggest, baddest, awesomest warship ever built up to that point in time. It's a great name, by the way, right? Dreadnought. If you break that down, what it means literally is fear nothing. That's what the Dreadnought is. And it doesn't fear anything. It's faster than any ship on the ocean. It's got bigger engines, so we can go faster. So we can outrun anything it doesn't want to fight, and it can catch up to anything it does want to fight. It has more guns than any ship. It's got a longer range than any. The next biggest warship at that time has got a range of around 4 miles, which means that if you had a warship here at Preston High School, it could hit Fairview Mall from where we are at Preston. That's what most warships could do. The Dreadnought has got a range of 12 miles. So that means they could fire, if that warship was here, the British warship was here, the Dreadnought, it could hit Conestoga Mall, not just Fairview Mall. So any ship that wants to go toe-to-toe with the Dreadnought has got to get within 4 miles of the Dreadnought in order to actually hit the Dreadnought. The Dreadnought can hit them from 12 miles out. So it can sink anything that it wants to go to war against. It's got 1 foot thick armor on the sides. Sorry, 6-inch thick armor, solid plate armor on the sides, and 18-inch solid steel armor on the front, on the prow, which it uses for ramming things. The Dreadnought is a wicked, wicked weapon of war. And the British unveiled this ship in the late 1800s and go, ha! Yeah, look at you, dastardly Germans, eh? Look at that. Eh? Fine. You want to build your navy? Deal with this navy. The problem with the Dreadnought is that it is such a good ship that it makes every other ship obsolete. The entire British Navy is essentially obsolete once the Dreadnought comes out. But that's fine, because they're the only country that has Dreadnoughts, right? It's like the Americans who had nuclear bombs after World War II. That's fine, because they're the only country that has it. And nobody else ever stole the plans to the nuclear bombs, which is why there wasn't a nuclear arms race. And the world didn't have, England and the United States and Russia didn't square off against one another, with the threat of nuclear annihilation. Wait, no, Russians did steal the bomb, and there was a Cold War. Darn it. Well, guess what happens? British create the Dreadnought, Germans steal the plans. The Germans, 2 years later, unveil their own Dreadnought, and now the English are looking at this Dreadnought coming off the line from Germany going, not good for them at all. Oh, what's England to do? England has now been hoisted on their own petard. There's a nice naval term for you. England, for millennia, has been on its own, has been independent, has not been allied with anybody. It doesn't need to be allied with anybody because its navy is so great. Now, there is a clear and present danger to the British Empire. Well, what's Britain to do? Britain sucks it up, buries their hatchet with their enemy of 1,000 years, and in 1905, what you have is the signing of the Franco-English Entente. The English Franco-English Entente. This is an agreement between England and France to protect both of their empires and nations against a German threat. Now, where is the British Empire? The British Empire is around the entire world, right? It's in the Far East, it's in South America, it's in the Caribbean, it's in Africa. Well, where's the French Empire? The French Empire is in all the same places. It's in the Far East, it's in Africa, it's in South America, it's in the Caribbean. So here is what the Franco-English Entente says. England brings its entire navy, which is patrolling the entire world for its empire, brings their entire navy back, and they stick the British Navy right here in this area around England to defend themselves against the Germans, the potential German threat. The French pick up the burden of protecting British colonies. So even though they have been rivals for 1,000 years, the French now say, okay, we'll protect India for you while we're protecting French Indochina, and we'll protect, your colonies in the Caribbean, while we're also protecting French Guiana, etc. What do the French get out of that? If they're protecting British colonies around the world, what do they get? Well, if England brings its navy and puts its navy right here, it also protects the French coast from the German threat. So England agrees, we will protect you and us against the Germans. You just watch over our colonies around the world. And so now that England and France have signed an agreement, and France and Russia have signed an agreement, we might as well complete the triangle. And what happens then in 1907 is England signs an entente with the Russians. And now that you've got England and France and Russia all in ententes with one another, what you have then is the triple entente and the triple alliance. And that's how we got to World War I in grade 10. Good? Makes sense so far? Okay. With these alliances now in place, and this is important to note, with these alliances now in place, it doesn't matter who pulls the trigger. And it doesn't matter when the trigger is pulled. A war against any one European power is going to involve all the European powers after 1907. And between 1907 and 1914, these alliances are tested. They're tested a number of times. There's a Balkan crisis in 1911. There is a Moroccan crisis in 1908. There's a Moroccan crisis in 1911 as well. There's another Balkan crisis in 1913. And these are all crises over various things. And in each case, what happens is you've got the European powers now ensconced in their alliances that are all swaggering and all sort of intimidating, trying to intimidate one another and forcing each other to back down. And what happens as a result of this is that various European powers are embarrassed and humiliated at various times between 1907 and 1914. The two that are most embarrassed are Germany after the Moroccan crisis in 1911 and Russia after the Balkan crisis of 1913. As a result of these crises, as a result of these embarrassments, more and more often, as we get closer to 1914, the European powers are more likely to go out on a limb to try and get their egos back, to fix their egos. They threaten each other more and more and more. Everybody in 1914, when the Archduke gets killed, everybody starts blustering and boistering and, puffing out their chests and threatening one another, just like they had in 1913, just like they did in 1911, just like they did in 1908. And there's no reason to expect, and none of the Europeans think in 1914 that this crisis is going to go any differently than the previous ones, where someone's going to back down, someone's going to get embarrassed, but it's not going to lead to a war. The problem is in 1914, nobody backs down and we have a war. Questions? No? Hey, Mr. Bryce is here, VP. 1 second, everybody. Hold on a second. All right. Sorry about that, folks. Sorry. There's long story short. There's all kinds of construction happening here in the school because they're building a new elevator that's going to go from all the floors. So where 124 is, some of you may have had class there. 124 is being all chewed up for the new elevator. Part of the art room and the family studies rooms upstairs are all getting demoed and changed. And now just found out that our office, the history office, is also being blown out and gone. So Mr. Bryce was just saying, sorry, you need to move all your stuff. So anyway, neither here nor there, but sorry, I left you there looking at a blank screen. Anyway, questions about how we get from Germany's creation in 1870 to a war in 1914. Anybody? Nobody? It was just that good, eh? Everybody's clear on it. Okay. All right. Well, listen. Here is the deal then for the remainder of the day. As I said, it's now 10:04. You've got the rest of the day to work on your projects that are due for me. I will have an optional meet today. Like I said before, from 12, we're going to do the meet today from 12 until 1 as per normal. Okay. But if you don't need to come on to the meet for any questions, if you're just going to be working away, that's fine. I'm going to send out an attendance email like I've done in the past, and you will then respond to that attendance email and work on your projects for the remainder of the day. Okay? And there's the bell. Time for lunch. Okay? Any questions? All right. Then the day is yours, folks.
Yeah.
Get going. Oh, Taylor. Yes.
I just have some questions about some stuff earlier on. So
Sure.
you mentioned pretty early on that the reason like a bunch of countries attacked China was because they killed some priests.
Yeah.
Would that have been like a cultural difference? Because I feel like a European power would like know better because they would know what would happen if they did that. But I'm guessing the Chinese didn't realize the significance.
Well, the Boxers realized the significance of the priests and the nuns. That's why they attacked them. But they thought that it would send a message to the Europeans to pull out of China. They didn't realize the way in which the Europeans would respond to that, which is you don't kill priests and nuns. So that's why. And again, the thing that brings them all together, despite the fact they've got all these differences, the Europeans, France and Germany, who hated one another at that point, allied themselves together against the Chinese. So France is involved, England's involved, Germany's involved, Russia's involved. All these countries that will be at war with each other in 1914 all coalesce together in outrage at the Boxer Rebellion and attack China. So yeah, it's a cultural, it's a miscalculation on the part of the Boxers, for sure.
And then Russia was able to get the nuclear plans because they stole them from the Americans?
Yeah. 1948, the Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, a New York couple, are arrested by the FBI and found guilty of espionage, stealing the plans and giving them to the Russians. Yeah. Other questions?
Are you guys going to get like your spaces back? Because it seems like they're destroying a lot of the building for that elevator.
Yeah. It's going to take about a year. So we're going to have to figure out where our office is going to be next year. We may not have an office next year, but yeah, we'll get it back. So for the September 2022, I should have my office back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess there's just that little door at the back that'll connect to the greenhouse now.
Yeah, the greenhouse, I don't think is going to be there anymore.
Oh.
So, yeah.
What about like there's the glass part outside, but then there's that little room in the back?
Yeah, that's gone.
Oh, damn. Yeah. That's a cool thing.
Yeah, it's going to get destroyed. Yeah.